Atelier is a quaint little RPG series made by the humble Gust Co. studio, and they've been at it for almost 25 years now. I've played less than a handful of Atelier games. I dabbled with the Mysterious trilogy, and I played Blue Reflection from the same studio. 2019's Atelier Ryza was my first really dedicated entry point to the series. I even tried to make a video about Ryza 1, but I wasn't really happy with how the video came together, so I scrapped it. I guess that makes this video a redemption project. Is Atelier Ryza 2 any good, and is it a good place to jump into the series? Let's find out. But first, please subscribe and click the bell to get updates whenever I post new videos. You can also check out my other videos, which I'll have annotated at the end. Now let's dive in. This review is based on the PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch physical retail releases and the PlayStation 5 digital upgrade retail release.
楽勝楽勝さあ早く進もうもっともっと強くなるぞ
Atelier Ryza 2 kicks off 3 years after the events of Atelier Ryza 1. Once again, you play as the young alchemist Ryza, who heads to the capital city to research a strange stone given to her for study. The mysterious rock turns out to be an egg containing a strange creature Ryza names Fee. Fee has an innate connection to the region's alchemy ruins, which is the driving force of the narrative. The biggest strength of Ryza 2's story is the fact that it's a direct sequel. Seeing how characters have matured over the past 3 years is really nice, and their interactions with new characters showcase many interesting tidbits of character growth. But Atelier Ryza 1 was a lot more about the journey than the destination, and that greatly benefits new players as well. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the first game. I played it, beat it, and enjoyed it for what it was. There were things I remembered from the first game that I was happy to follow up with here in the sequel, and there were things that Ryza 2 referenced that completely passed me by. But I never felt narratively lost, which is important. Most of Ryza 2's references to the first game come with brief conversational recaps, and even when they don't, it's pretty easy to infer the backstory. It's also a much more laid-back RPG in general, so not knowing every critical detail that occurred in Ryza 1 won't break Ryza 2's digestibility. The story does have its problems though. Ryza 2 is still pretty slow to start, though I find the introduction of 2 to be markedly shorter than that of the first game. I also noticed in my admittedly shallow dive into the series that there are constant cutscenes for both main and side quests, which I find really slow down the pacing. I don't mind any cutscenes individually, but cumulatively they make up a significant amount of the playtime. Due to the somewhat light-hearted nature of the game in general, coupled with the excessive amounts of cinematics, I felt the story lost a lot of steam about 3/4 of the way through. Fans of the series probably won't mind this one bit, but any like-minded newcomers may want to commit that to memory. I still enjoyed the story of Ryza 2 well enough for what it was. I just think it could have used a bit of streamlining. At a cursory glance, Atelier Ryza 2 looks really good across all platforms. Main character models are expressive and detailed, and certain environmental features look really sharp. The lighting on PlayStation 5 in particular really stood out to me. The bloom is quite emphatic and complements Ryza 2's art style very well. I only ever played Ryza 1 on Nintendo Switch, so I don't have a personal frame of reference for Ryza 1's graphics on PS4. If you look closer though, you can see that Ryza 2 has a handful of corner-cutting design choices. Some NPC models are muddy and plain-looking across all platforms, and especially on Nintendo Switch. Switch models can look like they're made of Play-Doh when they're seen up close, and there are times when they're deliberately shown up close. Certain effects are also lacking, like over here by this waterfall. The splashing is just a series of still images. They even turn so they're always facing the camera, a la the trees in Super Mario 64. And the high-resolution texture rendering distance is tiny on all platforms. You can see it best here on these windows in the Switch version. The left window has a shadow, the right one doesn't. Now watch what happens when I zoom in the camera. You can literally see the edge of the texture render moving with the camera. Zooming out shows the shadows and other textures disappearing. This also happens on PS4 and PS5, though it's a bit harder to see. Obviously, none of this is that big a deal. Again, it's a small studio, these are small problems, and the game overall looks really nice. I've heard that the digital PS5 version specifically has framerate issues when attempting to render in 4K, but I didn't see it myself. It could be because I'm playing the PS5 upgrade for the physical PS4 release versus the fully digital PS5 version, but I can't imagine that's the problem. Whatever the case may be, worst case scenario, if you run into this situation, just manually set your PS5 to output in 1080p and it should run just fine. Let's do some platform comparisons, starting with Switch handheld. I actually like the way Atelier Ryza 2 looks in tablet mode because it looks and runs well in practice. Here's Nintendo Switch docked. It's on par with the first game, which I also thought looked really good, and if you don't have a PlayStation, or if you just prefer the Switch for portability, this is a great way to play Ryza 2. Here's PlayStation 4. Really nice. Again, I never played the first game on PS4, so this version had a bit more wow factor to me. I think the improved lighting and shading gives the game a lot more visual flair. Also notice the visual texturing is much less pronounced on PlayStation than on Nintendo Switch. And here's PS5. Still really nice. Again, if you're going fully digital, you may have some frame rate issues, but it's easily remediated. Overall, I like the visual presentation. Ryza 2 has some really clever tricks built into the graphical design, and it's especially impressive when you consider it's from a small studio. I think you can make a good argument for the visuals being the strongest aspect of the game. The audio is also pretty good, but it probably had the least long-term impact upon me. Don't get me wrong, the music sounds just fine, but nothing particularly stood out to me as catchy or striking. It sounded good, and that's good enough. Additionally, the voice acting options are pretty bare bones. Much like Ryza 1, Ryza 2 only comes with Japanese voice acting, and while it all sounds good, I can't help but wish there was an English dub, especially given the game's very European aesthetic.
他の地区も軽く巡ってみるか。迷子になられても困るからな。
またそういうことを言う。でもここはおとなしく話を聞いておくことにするよ。
よし、じゃあまずは北の農業区と南の職人区に行ってみようか。
Again, the audio is fine, but it's rather plain substance-wise. Everything about it is focused on utility, and the minimal bells and whistles leave me wondering what could have been. The main crux of the gameplay is alchemy, which essentially boils down to foraging and crafting. You gather materials of varying quality and combine them into something new. Some of the material items' unique traits may be passed on to the synthesized item, such as increasing the product capabilities and improving the overall quality. And as you progress, you'll unlock the ability to rework items, create new recipes by adding certain materials to existing recipes, and even duplicate already crafted items in your inventory. Ryza 2 also adds a quick synthesize mode, with options for high or low quality builds. I think this feature is really great for newcomers, or for people who just aren't keen on crafting items one material menu at a time. Just having it in the game makes the alchemy crafting so much more accessible overall. Exploration has been further fleshed out as well. For instance, there are now proper dungeons in the form of ruins, and you can also explore by diving underwater, rope swinging in certain places, riding mounts, and climbing specific walls. It's not exactly groundbreaking since these features are functionally identical to their respective analogs in Ocarina of Time, but I'm glad it's there. It definitely makes the overworld feel much less restrictive when foraging and exploring. Each dungeon also comes with a mix and match riddle system. As you explore, you'll find clues containing lost writings. By filling in the blanks of the related text with the lost writing, you'll gain various bonuses, including items and recipes that allow you to continue forward. Some of the later clues can get a bit nebulous, but it's never difficult to figure out what goes where. I do like this feature though, as it makes dungeon exploration feel a bit more archaeological in storyline and more engaging in practice. Finally, combat has seen some overhaul compared to the first game. Battles are still turn-based affairs, with a steadily filling timer dictating the turn order. You only control one character at a time, but you can hit the trigger buttons to cycle between active party members. Attacking and defending both have timed button presses a la Paper Mario. Each time you successfully utilize these timed inputs, you build up action points, or AP. AP is used for skills which have a range of effects. If you have enough AP, you can even use multiple skills in one turn, and each added skill is given a damage multiplier. Using skills grants you core charges, or CC, and CC is consumed when using core items, which are battle items equipped by the player. AP can additionally be used to expend a core item out of turn order, which can be extremely useful in a pinch. Party members will occasionally ask you to fulfill certain combat criteria, and if you oblige, they will perform special action orders, which are essentially chained skills. Chaining together skills increases your tactics level. The higher your tactics level, the greater your AP cap, meaning you'll be able to perform more actions per turn. Finally, you have your Fatal Drive attack. It's only usable once per battle, but by holding circle and consuming all your AP, you can perform a Fatal Drive super attack, which deals damage relative to the amount of consumed AP. However, Fatal Drive reverts your tactics level back to level 1. I know this sounds like a lot, but the core gameplay loop basically boils down to attack to get AP, use AP to do skills, skills give you CC, then consume CC to use items. Items are going to be the strongest attacks at your disposal, and this only becomes more true as Ryza's alchemy improves. I do like how fast-paced battles are, which keeps the action engaging, but it's also quite hectic and not necessarily in a positive way. There's a lot of information to micromanage, and the overall user interface is somewhat unintuitive. I hesitate to call Atelier's combat overwhelming, because I don't think it is at all, but I don't believe calling the UI unintuitive is a stretch. If they just cleaned up the menu system for better clarity, it'd definitely be easier to manage. But much like everything else in Ryza 2, I was able to enjoy the gameplay for what it was, especially the alchemy. Crafting is much more streamlined and inviting, combat looks and feels more dynamic, and exploration has been made less restrictive and more engaging. It's not the best or most novel gameplay, but if you're a returning fan, you'll surely enjoy the expanded scope, and if you're a newcomer, there's definitely a lot here to like. Atelier Ryza 2 is toothless and bubbly. It's heavy on the charm and light on the urgency to its equal benefit and detriment. But it definitely has its moments. I was really happy to see Ryza 2's expanded gameplay and reworked combat, and the basic quality of life improvements are welcome additions. If Gustco decides to make the Ryza games into a trilogy, I'd really like to see exploration opened up with little to no restrictions in the third game. As for Ryza 2 specifically, I do like it, but I don't think it'll bring in new fans the way Ryza 1 did. It's certainly a decent enough game, and it makes plenty of strides to be accessible to new players. But given the series' lack of visibility, the fact that this game is a direct sequel, and the aforementioned issues with Ryza 2's story pacing, I can certainly see people being dissuaded from the title. But if anybody out there is looking for a bright, easygoing, alchemy-based adventure, whether you've been an Atelier fan for a quarter century, or if you're just looking for a new RPG to try out, Ryza 2 may have enough substance to satisfy that craving. Atelier Ryza 2: Lost Legends and the Secret Fairy earns a 7 out of 10. Thanks again for watching. Please subscribe and click the bell to stay up to date on my content, and check out the videos annotated on screen. Thanks!